Ragnar Lodbrok, the Saga of the Viking legend. In the dimly lit hall of a Viking chieftain, the air was thick with anticipation. Warriors, traders, and storytellers from distant lands had gathered, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of the roaring hearth. At the center of it all, seated on a grand throne carved from the bones of long-dead beasts, was the legendary Ragnar Lodbrok. Ragnar was a man of myth and mystery, a warrior whose deeds had reached the farthest corners of the Norse world. His eyes, the color of stormy seas, surveyed the room as he listened to the tales spun by bards and skalds. His long, wild hair and braided beard gave him an imposing presence, but it was his cunning mind and fearless spirit that had earned him the name Lodbrok, which meant hairy breeches in Old Norse, a reference to the unusual armor he wore. The saga spoke of Ragnar's birth, foretold by a blind seer who predicted that he would grow up to be the most famous Viking of his time. Born to the mighty warrior Sigurd Ring and the shield maiden Alfhild, he was raised in the icy wilderness of Scandinavia, learning the ways of the sword, the axe, and the longship from a young age. By the time he reached manhood, his reputation as a fierce warrior had already spread across the Northlands. As the night wore on, a hush fell over the hall, and all eyes turned to Ragnar as he rose from his throne. He was a master storyteller himself, and his voice was like a thunderstorm rolling across the fjords. "Tonight, my friends," he began, "I will share with you the tale of my most daring adventure, the one that earned me the name Lodbrok." The crowd leaned in, their breaths held in anticipation. "It was a bitter winter," Ragnar continued, "and I set out with my loyal crew on a journey to the distant lands of the east. Our longships cut through the freezing waves as we sailed toward the unknown." Ragnar's words transported his listeners to the treacherous waters of the Baltic Sea, where they could almost taste the salt spray and feel the biting cold. "We reached the shores of the land known as Russia today," Ragnar said, "and there we encountered a fierce and ruthless people, the Rus. Their leader, Yaropolk the Great, ruled with an iron fist, and he had heard of our coming." The audience gasped in anticipation, for Yaropolk was a name that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest warriors. "We met Yaropolk on the battlefield," Ragnar continued, his eyes gleaming with the fire of the storyteller. "It was a battle like none other, a clash of titans. We fought with the fury of Odin's own wolves, and in the end, it was I who stood victorious over Yaropolk." The hall erupted in cheers and applause, for Yaropolk's reputation as a fearsome warlord was legendary. "But the tale does not end there," Ragnar said, his voice lowering to a solemn tone. "For Yaropolk's death had consequences, and his brother, Oleg the Wise, sought revenge. Thus began a war that would test the limits of my cunning and courage." Ragnar's tale of betrayal, intrigue, and heroism unfolded like a tapestry of Viking lore. He spoke of battles on frozen rivers, of alliances forged and broken, and of his ultimate triumph over Oleg through a daring act of deception. As the story came to an end, the hall was filled with a sense of awe and admiration. Ragnar Lodbrok had once again proven himself as a masterful storyteller, but more than that, he had cemented his place as a true Viking legend. In the years that followed, Ragnar's name continued to echo through the sagas and songs of the Northlands. His legacy as a warrior, explorer, and storyteller lived on, inspiring generations of Vikings to come. And so, on that fateful night in the dimly lit hall, Ragnar Lodbrok had not only entertained his audience with his tale, but had also woven himself deeper into the tapestry of Viking history, becoming a legend for all time. The fame of Ragnar Lodbrok spread far and wide, drawing the attention of kings, jarls, and rival chieftains. His legend was not confined to his homeland. It reached the shores of distant lands where tales of his exploits ignited both fear and fascination. With each new adventure, Ragnar's reputation as a fearless Viking warrior and cunning strategist grew stronger. One of his most daring undertakings was a journey to the legendary city of Paris, a place of riches and grandeur. The stories of Paris had reached the Northlands, and Ragnar's desire to plunder the city's treasures was insatiable. He gathered a mighty fleet and set sail for the Seine. As his longships approached the city, the inhabitants of Paris looked upon the horde of Viking warriors with terror. The Vikings had come to their gates, and there seemed to be no escape from their wrath. The siege of Paris was fierce, and the defenders put up a valiant fight, but Ragnar's cunning tactics and relentless assaults eventually wore down their resistance. Ragnar's siege towers loomed over the walls of Paris, and his warriors fought their way into the heart of the city. The streets ran red with blood, and the clash of swords echoed through the narrow alleys. It was a battle of epic proportions, and it seemed that Paris was doomed to fall to the Vikings. However, the defenders of Paris were not without their own resourcefulness. They sent emissaries to the Frankish king, Charles the Bald, pleading for aid. In response, Charles gathered a mighty army to confront Ragnar and his raiders. The two forces met on the battlefield outside the walls of Paris, and a ferocious clash ensued. Ragnar, with his legendary battle axe in hand, fought at the forefront of his men. The battle raged for days, with neither side giving an inch. In the midst of the chaos, Ragnar spotted a weak point in the Frankish lines and led a daring charge that broke their formation. With their ranks in disarray, the Franks were forced to retreat, and the siege of Paris was lifted. Ragnar had come close to claiming the city's riches, but it had eluded his grasp. Though he had not succeeded in plundering Paris, Ragnar's audacity and prowess in battle were etched into the annals of Viking history. His name became synonymous with fearless exploration and daring raids, and his legacy continued to inspire Viking warriors for generations. Ragnar Lodbrok's adventures did not end there, for he was a man driven by an unquenchable thirst for glory. He would go on to explore new lands, face formidable foes, and weave new tales that would be recounted by storytellers and skalds for centuries to come. And so, the legend of Ragnar Lodbrok lived on, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Vikings and the enduring power of storytelling in the saga-rich world of the Northlands. Ragnar Lodbrok's restless spirit led him on a series of adventures that spanned the known world. His thirst for glory and the desire to etch his name into the annals of history drove him ever onward. One of his most fabled expeditions took him to the distant shores of England, where he would face challenges that would test his legendary resolve. As Ragnar's fleet approached the coast of Northumbria, word of his impending arrival spread like wildfire. The Northumbrian king, Ella, knew of Ragnar's fearsome reputation and made preparations to defend his kingdom. He mustered an army and fortified the coastline, ready to repel the Viking invaders. The clash between the Northumbrians and Ragnar's warriors was brutal. The battlefield became a maelstrom of blood, sweat, and steel. But Ragnar, with his unwavering determination and cunning tactics, eventually gained the upper hand. King Aella was captured, and the Northumbrian forces were defeated. Ragnar, however, had something more than conquest in mind. He sought revenge against Aella for the death of his favorite son, Ivar the Boneless, who had been thrown into a pit of vipers on Aella's orders. Ragnar devised a gruesome and poetic punishment for the Northumbrian king. He had Aella cast into a pit filled with venomous snakes, mirroring the fate of his beloved son. As the serpent struck and Aella's screams echoed, Ragnar watched with grim satisfaction. It was a brutal retribution that sent shockwaves throughout the Viking world, solidifying Ragnar's reputation as a ruthless avenger. But Ragnar's adventures were not solely defined by violence and conquest. He was also known for his sagacious leadership and the ability to forge powerful alliances. During his travels, he established diplomatic ties with other Viking chieftains, strengthening his position and expanding his influence. Ragnar's legacy as a warrior, strategist, and legendary figure continued to grow. Songs and poems were composed in his honor, and his name was whispered with awe in the great halls of Scandinavia. He became a symbol of Viking valor and determination, an embodiment of the indomitable spirit of the Norsemen. Yet even a legend as great as Ragnar Lodbrok was not immune to the relentless passage of time. As he aged, his adventures became fewer, and his once mighty frame grew weaker. In the twilight of his life, Ragnar reflected on the many battles he had fought, the kingdoms he had conquered, and the legends he had forged. On a quiet night, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Ragnar Lodbrok passed away, surrounded by his loyal companions and family. His legacy, however, would live on, carried forward by the generations of Vikings who revered his name and the storytellers who would ensure that the sagas of Ragnar Lodbrok would endure for eternity. And so the saga of Ragnar Lodbrok, the Viking legend, became an enduring testament to the Viking Age, a time of exploration, conquest, and the relentless pursuit of glory in the face of adversity.